Glasses first or mask first? The eternal question. Thank you, Carlene, for that beautiful prelude. And what a glorious day to see so many faces. Loving it up here. As we begin our service today, know this: you are welcome here. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your age, race, class, ability, or gender, you are welcome here. Whatever spiritual paths you have traveled, if any, you are welcome here. For here at the Unitarian Universalists of Transylvania County, our faith calls us not to a particular creed, but to a covenant to honor every person's worth and dignity. We ask only that you come in goodwill. I'm Vanessa Cowie. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm the worship team leader here at the Unitarian Universalists of Transylvania County, where our mission is to support individual spiritual journeys and to promote social, economic, and environmental justice. We have some announcements. So that we can come together safely here at UUTC. Please use the clipboards to sign your name and telephone number in case contact tracing again becomes necessary. We have used it a few times. Wear masks while in the building unless you're here at the pulpit. Even the choir will be wearing masks today as they sing for you, and let the choir do the singing for the time being, difficult as that may be. Please do participate by humming, swaying, dancing, or clapping. The science tells us that virus exchange becomes more perilous with singing than ordinary talking when it comes to infection. And for that reason, choir members are all vaccinated, and they used a quick COVID test this morning to ensure that they are all negative for the coronavirus. Really, really. A lot of scratching noses this morning. Remember to exit the building quickly between services so that our air in this space can completely exchange before the second service. We will pass baskets for the offertory today. But you can still place your name tags in the bowls by the door, and then you won't have to come back into the building to place them. They'll be placed for you. And if there's a deep joy or concern in your heart that you'd like to share within this community this morning, please ask an usher to come to you with a piece of paper and a pen or pencil and write it down. And an usher will bring it to Reverend Bob to be added to his pastoral prayer following the cycle of life. We'll give you another reminder. And get ready for flower communion. Now, I can hear you saying, Vanessa, you're mixed up. Flowers bloom in the spring. But the spelling I'm talking about is F-L-O-U-R, communion. Next Sunday is the one before Thanksgiving, and we don't want to completely miss the chance to break bread together again this year. So if you want to participate, bring a pre-baked, pre-wrapped goodie next Sunday or during office hours this week, and leave it on the island in the fellowship hall. Please include the recipe or ingredients, alert us to the fact if it's gluten-free or has potential allergens, and include a story about its origins if you want. Then when you leave the service, pick up a different goodie. It's just kind of like flower communion, only spelled differently. And speaking of breaking bread together, weather permitting, fellowship on the Green is every Tuesday morning from 11:30 to 1:30. Bring a lunch, bring takeout food, and share it outside on the Green with us. I'll remind you also that the Soul Matters group is meeting at 12:30 just after the second service today. The theme is Holding History. And now, I ask you to relax into the spirit of worship as we listen to Spirit of Truth, of Life, of Power, sung by the UUTC choir, led by John Austin and accompanied by Carlene Reagan. We open today with words from the Reverend Karen G. Johnston, the settled minister at the Unitarian Society in East Brunswick, New Jersey. Reverend Johnston also facilitates Climate Spirit, a gathering of people in central New Jersey that's filled with ritual, singing, food, and connection, coming together to process grief for our beloved planet. Ever in our midst, ancestors who spoke with bravest fire, lend us your senses that we may know another world is on her way, breathed into life with our participation in her creation. Forebears who led the way where there was at first no way, lend us your persistence, your temerity, your assurance that the moral arc of the universe does bend toward justice. Ones who went before us, sacrificing for a future not your own, help us to give of ourselves, that the common stones in our hands today might be cathedrals of compassion today, halls of restorative justice tomorrow, sheltering walls of beloved community the day after. It is Sunday morning, the day we gather. Let us be thankful and full of praise to be in the company of those who came before, yet are ever in our midst. We now light the chalice that is a symbol of Unitarian Universalism with words from the Reverend Florence Kaplow. Reverend Kaplow is the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Urbana-Champaign in Illinois. She is also a writer, editor, and ordained Soto Zen priest. All Souls Day was just a few days ago, November 2nd, and originated in the Roman Catholic faith as a day of remembrance for friends and loved ones who have passed away. This is All Souls chalice lighting. As we kindle this flame, we honor and remember those who have passed into mystery. Their brightness lives on in our vision. Their courage lives on in our commitments, and their love continues to bless the world through us. Our first hymn today is number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. I invite you to rise as you're willing and able and hum, dance, or sway as you enjoy the music.
The wisdom for all ages that I've chosen for today is what to do when your house is being burgled while you were asleep. So I choose a famous Unitarian woman from our history as the example. I don't know if anybody here has heard of Jane Addams, who in a previous century was in charge of one of those places of helping people in need in Chicago. She had founded an institution much like places that we support here, like Sharing House or The Haven, or going over to Michael and bringing bread to be shared. This woman, Jane Addams, had started this settlement house outreach program to help the poor in Chicago. She lived in a grand old house. One evening as she went to bed and was just barely on the edge of sleep, she heard some noises. So her window was raised in her bedroom, and a thief crawled in. What would you do in this situation? This was before they had panic buttons, 911. I don't even know that she had a telephone back then. It's a good question. It certainly wouldn't have been on her bedside table. She just laid quietly as the man went through, put a nice candlestick into his sack, found some other nice things, and then very stealthily went back to the window to crawl out and escape with the loot. She decided at that instant to say something. She said, "Oh, no, not that way. Use the door. It's much safer." This startled the burglar. The burglar was quite shocked that this is what somebody would say when he was discovered. The burglar paused and then went out the door. It's said that the burglar later came back to the settlement house to meet this amazing person who would let themselves be robbed and then care for the humanity of the robber. And that he turned his life around and found honest employment, and even more, a sense of dignity in the way he led the rest of his life. Jane Addams is one of those Unitarians or Unitarian Universalists who made a difference. Not just with one person, as that story says, but with many others, in actually trying to live out what we were preaching about the worth and dignity of each person, even if they're robbing you in the middle of the night. So that is my story of wisdom for this morning. We have Jackson, who will come forward and will take the light and the candle and lead the children out to our children's religious exploration, and we will, as you're willing and able, rise and wave as they leave.
Thank you, Reverend Bob, for lighting the candles for Cycle of Life. We believe we increase joy and ease sorrows by sharing them in this loving community. We now pause to honor milestones and to lift up those who need our healing thoughts. If there's something in your heart to share at this time, just raise your hand and alert the ushers who will bring it forward to Reverend Bob. Here's one. Over on this side, I think, so that Reverend Bob can include it in his prayer that follows the cycle of life. Okay, thank you. Meanwhile, if you're watching this live online, please share your joys and sorrows in the chat function, and Reverend Bob will light a candle for them as well. This is Native American Heritage Month, and today's sermon calls on us to remember those who have gone before us. We light a candle to acknowledge that we live and worship on the traditional territories of the Cherokee and the Yuchi before them, the original peoples of this land. The Transgender Day of Remembrance is this week, November 20th. we light a candle to honor the memory of those whose lives have been lost in acts of anti-transgender violence, and for all those lives that have been impacted by such violence. We light a candle for our beloved Earth, whose beauty we just celebrated in hymn. This candle also recognizes the urgent work of people at the International Climate Summit in Glasgow, Scotland, that just concluded. And although much progress has been made, we are aware that COVID continues to challenge our county and the world. We light a candle for courage, perseverance, and patience in meeting fresh sorrows and anxieties. Once again, we salute those workers on the front lines during this pandemic in all fields of work, and especially medical staff. And in this Thanksgiving season, we light a candle for those who are in crisis and need our help, such as the residents of the Haven, our social giving charity this month. This next candle honors our ancestors, those who laid down the paths we now travel. And we light a candle for those milestones shared in the online chat. And we light a final candle for all those joys and sorrows that remain unspoken at this time. Thank you.
As we continue in this prayerful moment, I invite you to take a deep breath. Spirit of love and life, we who are gathered here today come with our joys and our sorrows, our concerns, our hopes. May our prayers and our actions reach out to those who are recovering from treatments or surgery. In particular, our prayers go out to Janet Benway, who asks for our thoughts and prayers as she recovers from surgery. Our joys are magnified together. Let us be grateful for the opportunities to meet and greet one another. In particular, this morning, a joy from Tom. My joy is having son Tom, grandson Will, attending services on Joyce's birthday. And also, the love of family and the time to spend with them. May we hold these prayers in our hearts. In recognition, as Vanessa said, that Transgender Remembrance Day is arriving this week on November 20th. In solemn recognition, I will, during this prayer time, read the names of transgender and gender non-conforming individuals who were killed in the USA and Puerto Rico in 2021. The list is accurate up to last week according to hrc.org. These people range in age from high school teenagers through people in their late 40s. I will read the names and the state in which they were murdered. Tiana Alexander, Illinois. Samuel Edmund Damian Valentin, Puerto Rico. Bianca Muffin Banks, Georgia. Dominique Jackson, Mississippi. 50 Bance, Louisiana. Alexis Braxton, Florida. Shaina Carrillo in Pennsylvania. Siblings Jeffrey J.J. Bright and Jasmine Kennedy, Pennsylvania. Jenna Franks, North Carolina. Diamond Kyle Sanders, Ohio. Rihanna Pardo, California. Jada Peterson, North Carolina. Dominique Luscious, Missouri. Remy Fennell, North Carolina. Tiara Banks, Illinois. Natalia Smut, California. Iris Santos, Texas. Tiffany Thomas, Texas. Carrie Washington, Florida. Jaharia D'Alto, Massachusetts. Whispering Wind Bear Spirit, Pennsylvania. Sophie Vasquez, Georgia. Danica Danny Henson, Maryland. Serenity Hollis, Georgia. Oliver Ollie Taylor, Oregon. Thomas Harden, South Carolina. Poe Black, California. E.J. Boykin, Virginia. Adellen Evans, Texas. Taya Ashton, Maryland. Shai Vanderpump, New Jersey. Tierra Marie Lewis, Ohio. Miss Coco, Texas. Pooh Johnson, Louisiana. Tazea Monai, Illinois. Brianna Hamilton, Illinois. Kyre Laprie Cartier, Texas. Mel Groves, Mississippi. Royal Poetical Stars, Florida. Zoe Lola Rose Martinez, Washington. Joe Acker, Idaho. Jesse Hart, Oregon. Ricky Altamuro, Washington. Marquisha Lawrence, South Carolina. The prayer I now read for Trans Remembrance Day are the words of Reverend Deborah J. Hopkins, a Black trans woman minister at the Sacred Souls Community Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. She prayed this in the name of the Liberator, Jesus. Loving Creator, let the rain come and wash away the ancient grudges, the bitter hatreds held and nurtured over generations. Let the rain wash away the memory of the heart and neglect. Then, O God, let the sun come out and fill the sky with beautiful rainbows. Let the warmth of the sun heal us whenever we are broken. Let it burn away the fog so that each of us sees each other clearly, so that we can move beyond labels, beyond accents, gender, sexual orientation, or skin color. Let the warmth and brightness of the sun melt our selfishness, so that we can share the joy and sorrow of our neighbors. And let the light of the sun be so strong that we will see all people as our neighbors. Let the earth, nourished by rain, bring forth flowers to surround us with your beauty, and let the mountains teach our hearts to reach upward to heaven. Then, dear God, grant us comfort, give us peace, and allow us strength to enable us to stand up, fight for, and be a voice for equality. Amen. We are called to be generous. We are called to recognize that the collection of all our talents, the use of our time, the sharing of our treasure, and the granting of our trust to others and to the institutions we hold dear. These are things cultivated in all the world's religions. At this time, yes, I ask that we pass these homemade baskets to collect the treasure that you wish to place in there. Perhaps you've done it online already and pass it on to someone else. Visitors here today, just know that just because nobody's putting something in there doesn't mean they haven't given already. But I invite you to pass the basket in this time as we enjoy the sounds of the choir.
Secret chord that David played, and it pleased the Lord. A new
I do not apologize for repeating myself. Those of you who came to my online virtual UU history class on women back in Women's History Month may have heard some of this before. Some of you may have heard me choose a reading from this book before as well. Tough. If it's worth hearing once, it's worth hearing again. Though I hope you won't beg me like my children who had favorite storybooks to hear it every day, I'm going to read from The Progress of Religious Ideas from Lydia Maria Child, Volume 1. This is the preface. Oh, by the way, this was published in the year 1855. I would candidly advise persons who are conscious of bigoted attachment to any creed or theory not to purchase this book. Whether they are bigoted Christians or bigoted infidels, its tone will likely to displease them. My motive in writing has been a very simple one. I wish to show that theology is not religion, with the hope that I might help to break down partition walls, to ameliorate what the eloquent Bushnell calls the baptized hatreds of the human race. In order to do this, I've endeavored to give a concise and comprehensive account of religions in the liberal spirit of the motto on my title page. The period embraced by my plan extends from the most ancient Hindu records to the complete establishment of the Catholic Church. While my mind was yet in its youth, I was offended by the manner in which Christian writers usually describe other religions, for I observed that they habitually covered apparent contradictions and absurdities in Jewish or Christian writings with a veil of allegories and mystical interpretation. While the records of all other religions were unscrupulously analyzed or contemptuously described childish fables or filthy superstitions. I was well aware that this was done unconsciously under the influence of habitual reverence for early teaching, and I was still more displeased with the scoffing tone of skeptical writers who regarded all religions as founded on imposture. Either way, the one-sidedness of the representation troubled my strong sense of justice. I recollect wishing long ago that I could become acquainted with some good, intelligent Brahmin or Mahometan, that I might learn in some degree how their religions appeared to them. This feeling expanded within me until it took form in this book. The facts it contains are very old. The novelty it claims is the point of view from which those facts are seen and presented. I have treated all religions with reverence and have shown no more favor to one than another. I have exhibited each other in the light of its own sacred books, and in giving quotations I have aimed in every case to present impartiality, the beauties and the blemishes. I have honestly tried never to exaggerate merits or conceal defects. I have not declared that any system was true or that anyone was false. I've even avoided the use of the word heathen, for although harmless in its original signification, it is used in a way that implies condescension or contempt, and such a tone is inconsistent with the perfect impartiality I have wished to observe. I've wished to place each form of worship in its own light, that is, as it appeared to those who sincerely believed it to be of divine origin. Her preface goes on for several more pages, but I want time for the sermon. This, in our month of holding history, I present to you a sermon entitled, Ever in Our Midst. it's so easy to forget the stories of old, to forget the people who've come before, scholars, the social workers, the teachers, the scientists, the public servants, the engineers, all those who worked in the past to bring us something to reap of the harvest of this current time. Those who laid the pathway for us in our religion, in our society, as a light in the world. I present to you a list, therefore, a retrospective on some of the women in our history, to remember not just the women, but any gender who may not have been recognized in their time, to understand the ways in which, no matter where they were stuck in their place in society, they advanced our understanding in some way. They showed a courage to innovate and bring something fresh and new. Lydia Mariah Child is known for many things. Thanksgiving time, over the river and through the woods, to grandmother's house or grandfather's house in the original. We go, and it ends with, hurrah for the pumpkin pie. Actually, it's something like, I don't know, I'm going to exaggerate here, 17 stanzas. But some of us old enough to remember that being taught or sung will remember this author this way. But as I've said in the past, Lydia Mariah Child was known to write books on subjects such as anti-slavery, on 3-volume encyclopedia of religions as told from the perspective of the adherents who loved those religious paths. 1855, it was not usual for a woman to be writing. It was not usual for a woman to be a recognized religious scholar. Much more likely that a women's journal might have over the river and through the woods. But to know that publishers would put out things about anti-slavery, the respect of all races, and the respect of all religious stances as well. Lydia Mariah Child said of her time period, I was gravely warned by some of my female acquaintances that no woman could expect to be regarded as a lady after she had written a book. Yeah. And maybe it wasn't just that. Quite possibly not being understood as a lady unless you were well supported by a wealthy, well-placed husband, or inherited in any time or age. Judith Sargent Murray, who lived from 1751 to 1820, and things like this are on uua.org. I'm stealing all of it. The person who put this collection together that I'll briefly quote from is Lauren Walliser. But many histories have Judith Sargent Murray. She was the first woman born into the United States to have her plays performed professionally. She wrote numerous poems and essays on religion, politics, education, and the manners and the customs of the day, illustrating her views through fictional stories. She was the wife of John Murray, one of the founders of American Universalism. She also wrote one of the earliest published statements on women's rights, entitled On the Equality of the Sexes. It was first published in 1790. Feminists republished it in 1973, showing how her impact spanned generations. As someone who loves Unitarian Universalist or Unitarian Universalist history, Judith Sargent Murray is one of the ones who rises to the top. Our Constitution just barely signed, our Bill of Rights just put into place in 1790. She is advocating for the equality of the sexes. She's not the only one from our religious tradition. We have Mrs. Adams of President John Adams, or at the time delegate to the Continental Congress, John Adams, writing to her husband and saying, please do not forget the ladies, as they were working on independence and the formulation of the words that would lay down our Constitution, lay down our foundational documents, and grant freedoms. John may have tried, but there was nothing specifically about women written into the documents. We have people who are from different races and had a hard time being accepted. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, born 1825, died 1911. Frances Ellen Hopkins Harper was a prolific writer, lecturer, and reformer. She wrote many books of poetry with strong anti-slavery themes, as well as a novel about African American life during Reconstruction, which was published by our own Unitarian Beacon Press. She was a writer for the African Methodist Episcopal Church and a member of the Unitarian Church. Watkins once refused to give up her seat on a Philadelphia streetcar. When the conductor refused to take her money at the end of the ride, that was a different way of doing it back then, she threw it on the floor as she left. She was a courageous and powerful voice for justice as an African American Unitarian woman in the 1800s up to 1911. That name needs to be remembered. Just 10 years younger, Olympia Brown. Olympia Brown was one of the first women ministers whose ordination was recognized by any religious denomination when the Universalist Convention in New York ordained her after her graduation from the Universalist Seminary, St. Lawrence, New York. Olympia Brown is one of those names you later hear of the women suffragists. She's one of those people who worked for justice. And she worked as a Unitarian pastor, or Universalist, pastor. I remember hearing the story as I grew up in Connecticut about her being in charge of the congregation in Bridgeport, now in Stratford. The congregation still exists. And she was asking for more support of the congregation and saying that there were some people in the pews who could do more. She was specifically looking out at a particular gentleman named Phineas Taylor Barnum, P.T. Barnum, said, "I'm looking at you, Mr. Barnum." She later went on to Wisconsin and had a long career in the Unitarian Church. Think of that, folks. Women in ministry in our movement long before it was even debated in most churches in this country, on this continent. There's a whole book about women in ministry, and of course, as a minister going up through the system, this was part of the assigned reading, and I got to go to a presentation by the author, Cynthia Tucker, who graciously signed my copy. Here is a dog-eared Post-it note, well faded, from quotes that I was reading and studying back then. This is a little bit about Rowena Morse Mann, who was forced out of active service as a Unitarian minister in her early 50s. Mann's pulpit at the Third Unitarian Church on Chicago's west side had been on shaky ground even before she arrived in 1911, an influx of European immigrants having changed the neighborhood culture and largely displaced the market for liberal religion. The few Unitarians who had stayed on in the parish were happy to see how the place brightened up after Dr. Morse took over, and how her rare pulpit eloquence brought a sizable block of commuters back in from the suburbs on Sundays. Insiders also appreciated the benefits of the minister's marriage soon after she came to them, knowing that Newton Mann's income, her husband, not only allowed her to work for a pittance, what a cheapo congregation, but that in the interest of advancing his wife's position, he pledged a fourth of her yearly salary to the church, upping the ante in the society's dealings with the American Unitarian Association headquarters, so that they would get larger annual subsidies from Boston. But the congregation was nearly wiped out after the summer of 1919, which had a mass exodus of white people from Chicago, the white middle class, streaming to the suburbs after the race riots of that summer. They thought that a bigger combined church in downtown Chicago with Rowena Morse Mann as the preacher would be the biggest liberal draw in the city, and they wished to combine and make it big, and asked for help from the Unitarian Association in Boston. And the UA's white, male, privileged president didn't show interest. Quite honestly, it's said that President Eliot of the Unitarians didn't know what to do with the women. When the Western Unitarian Conference, based in Chicago, sent as their representative a woman minister to vote on the board, I believe he was flummoxed. It's interesting what Eliot suggested if they wanted a better ministry in larger congregations. He said, "We have good men, graduates of theological school, who are recommended to you." And he suggested new leadership. The congregation studied the record of this minister and found the UUA's man to be unacceptable, to put it mildly. A ludicrous replacement for their present pastor, the Reverend Rowena Morse Mann, who is a rare talent, and they believed their only hope for survival. They said Chicago's pulpits were already filled with men of no ability. the south side had an eccentric, and the north side someone no better, a nothing. If you have found a real minister, keep her and sustain her was their remedy. And so they continued on with the women in the pulpit in the West. The whole book is called Prophetic Sisterhood by Cynthia Grant Tucker, telling of the women who went to the Midwest not being accepted in most Eastern congregations, other than an exception like Olympia Brown in Bridgeport, Connecticut. They, perhaps paired in their Boston marriage relationship, two women ministers might go out and serve, or individuals. It's not just because I'm a minister that I'm looking at that. It's because built in, baked into our system is both the men of privilege who could not recognize real talent if it was standing right in front of them in a boardroom, if it came in a gender that was not their own. It was also those very pioneering women and later people of any gender designation who would stand up and do excellent ministry. We inherit both these threads, the good and the dated, the blind and the enlightened in what we do in ministry. I bring these people and other unknowns like the 20th century leader Cecilia Payne Gaposhkin. Cecilia Payne Gaposhkin was the first woman to receive tenure and the first chair to chair a department in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Harvard University. She was born in 1900, so she's a 20th century person for a 17th century institution, the very first. She was an astronomer. She discovered that hydrogen is millions of times more abundant than any other element in the universe, along with many more scientific breakthroughs. She also had time to teach Sunday school at First Parish Unitarian in Lexington, Massachusetts. As this review says, during a time when the sciences were even more dominated by men than they are today, her persistence and her brilliance made incredible stories for women and openings in the field. From civil rights activists to social workers, we are indebted in our movement, as this congregation is, the leadership of people of multiple genders. Thank you for allowing me the chance to bring forward something that you may have missed, or to remind you and add a couple new names for those who've had the histories that I've shared before. Thank you for sitting through a history lecture. I even thought of just wearing my black robe and looking very scholarly. But I'm not here preaching scholarship. I'm here preaching the idea that any of us in this religion should be encouraged, accepted, empowered, equipped to go out and do the best of what we have, to give to a world that may not be ready for us as Unitarians, Universalists, Unitarian Universalists, nor the way we are uniquely presenting ourselves. May we not be the mediocre people that society might wish us to be. May we blaze paths for others. And may we never forget or leave behind the efforts of those who have gone before. As Lydia Maria Child said, so easy it is to see the errors of past ages, so difficult to acknowledge our own. May you be the ones who lift up the difficult insights, the difficult progress, the difficult personality in insisting on the wider circle of all. In this spirit, I ask you to rise and sway and hum while the choir sings, and I will too. Number 212, We Are Dancing Sarah's Circle. Sisters, brothers, all. On and on the circles moving, on and on the circles moving, on and on the circles moving, sisters, brothers, all. Though the lives of all the helpers we have named have passed on, we still benefit of their help. Though this light be extinguished, we still have the lights of each of us here and online to carry forth the light and the beauty and the wonder that is of our open religion. Our minds, our hearts tuned to the widening circles. For all of us, of any gender, may blessings be on you this week as you go off and make the ripples in the ponds that you visit, and then come back here again in love. Blessed be. Amen.